there, I'm Nancy Stevens with Tri-S Investigations, guys. It's nice to be doing this for you finally. Let me tell you a little bit about Tri-S to start with. I started Tri-S Investigations in 1996, and I came out of about close to 10 years in social work before I had done this, and I'd done specialized work in home family therapy with families with severely emotionally disturbed children who were at risk of removal from their home, or had been, and they were coming back into the home. So I had some really specialized and very unique training in that area. When my boys went off to college at WVU, and I decided that this just wasn't working because we kept having cutbacks in Medicaid, and the programs I worked for kept closing about every 2 years. I really gave a lot of thought to what do I really want to be when I grow up. And it really was, I wanted to get paid to be nosy. I wanted to be an investigator. So I decided that when I got laid off from the job I was in at that point in February of 1996, that I would check and see what it took to be an investigator in West Virginia, to actually get paid for some of the stuff that I did anyway. So I did, and by June I had my license and my first case, and I worked on a few cases and then got a phone call from an attorney named Bill Kiger, who was the prominent attorney in Parkersburg, actually in a lot of West Virginia. And he called me and asked me to come down, so I went down all excited. I had my legal pad with me and a pen, and I sat down at his desk and I was like, "Okay, Mr. Kiger, how can I help you?" And Bill said, "I have a murder case," and I just about fell out of my chair. And I said, and I can remember it so clearly, I said, "Bill, you must know the ink is not dry on my license. I know nothing about working on a murder case or any defense cases. I thought I was going to do guardian ad litem work." So anyway, he said, "Well, just start taking notes and you'll learn." And by golly, he was right. I worked with Bill for a couple of years, and by the end of that couple of years, we probably had 50 cases. And I had to hire one person in my office and one person to do investigative work. The actual guardian ad litem work that I thought we would be doing that I didn't have time for because there was so much demand for criminal defense work. Within 4 years, the boys had graduated from college and had come back to Parkersburg to work with me, believe it or not, which shocked me. I thought they would go off and conquer the world, but they came home and worked with Tri-S, and they're still with Tri-S, which has been such a blessing. It's really a family operation. We have my sister Joyce, who runs our office with love and diligence and caring and compassion, and does Social Security work for us as well. We have Mitch and Mike, who are my sons, Mitch and Mike Barton. They both do criminal defense work, and they also do bonding work for another company. We have Dominic Dye, who you're going to meet shortly, and you'll just fall in love with, I'm sure, as I did day one. And she's standing behind the camera smiling as I say that. Dom's been with us like forever. That voice you just heard is Faith, grand champion, Cowa's Elements of Faith, who travels with me every place I go, and you'll probably see before we finish the video project. We also have Jimmy, who is Joyce's son, Jimmy Wright, who came with us 6 months ago maybe a little less than that, and who was just a natural at this. One of the interesting things about this work, about Tri-S Investigations, I think, compared to other investigative companies, is that we do kind of specialize in criminal defense work, and there are not many investigative firms out there that do that. We are a firm as opposed to an individual license holder, which means that we can employ people in West Virginia, and they work under my supervision as the license holder. We're licensed also in Ohio, and Mike is our licensing agent in Ohio. Let me tell you just a tiny bit about the reasons I do this work. First of all, the most important reason is I feel like God calls me to it. I just think that God so perfectly equipped me to do this, and He had this in mind all along, if I'm not mistaken. I was perfectly prepared through my training with doing in-home family therapy and my social work, as well as my bachelor's degree in criminal justice. Everything just kind of came together really nicely. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back or blow my own horn. God knows that's not who I am. It just was a perfect use of the skill set that I was given. And it come to find out, it was in a field that was non-existent basically when I started. The only investigators doing any criminal defense work were retired law enforcement, and they came at this very jaded, and I don't say that maliciously, but they had worked for years as prosecution investigators, if you will. So for us to come at this as social workers with a different mindset that, you know, even if somebody's guilty of something, that doesn't mean they're guilty of what they're charged with. And many people are charged not guilty of anything that they're charged with. You cannot imagine what that, nor can I imagine what that must feel like. For instance, to be charged with a murder case, a murder charge, and you not to have even been anywhere around when it happened. And worse yet, to be convicted and to be put in prison and to have to stay there for 12 years before your conviction is overturned, as was the case with Brian, who I had spoken to Barbara about. Brian's case is probably one of my, it's the closest case to my heart, I think, of any cases I've worked on. Maybe because I worked on it as long as I did, maybe because I had the outcome we had. I don't know why, but it's a case that changed my life, and God knows certainly changed his life. Brian was a law student at WVU in Morgantown in 2002 when he was charged with murder for a young man, also a student at WVU. A young man had been killed, and Brian was charged with the crime. His family did what a good family will do. They hired him an attorney there, and his family came from the legal field in the court systems, so they trusted the legal justice system, the criminal justice system, to do right by Brian, and sadly it did not, and Brian was convicted of a murder that I am absolutely convinced he didn't commit. I got Brian's case after he was convicted. I got it on appeal, was given the case and asked by the attorneys to see what I thought about whether I thought they had a defense or anything in the file that would let us get to a habeas level or an appeal level in Brian's case. Worked on it for 2 or 3 years, and built enough evidence that we were able to present it to the Supreme Court in a fashion that the Supreme Court said, in West Virginia, this is the West Virginia Supreme Court, they said that due to the extenuating circumstances basically in the case and the fact that there was another suspect, and the attorney that was Brian's attorney, who was paid a lot of money to be Brian's attorney, didn't do anything to investigate that other suspect, that they thought that evidence, had it been presented at trial, might have been enough to cause even one of the jurors to have reasonable doubt. And they wanted that sent back to a local judge for review. So that was a huge accomplishment in our case. And it went back to the judge, and eventually that judge was replaced and another judge came on, and the other judge that came onto the case decided that after days of hearings that there was enough evidence that had it been presented at the time, there was a likelihood that at least one juror, if not all of them, would have had reasonable doubt and Brian would have been acquitted. So the verdict was set aside. Brian was determined after 12 years to be not guilty of the charge at that time. We had to make decisions then about whether he was going to face trial again, and of course the state of West Virginia would not drop the charges in spite of all the evidence that was presented. So Brian elected to take a plea for time served, and is now a free man, thanks be to God, in Washington, D.C., and is working with a think tank there, developing a program that will help other men coming out of prison be more successful with reintegration. I could go on all day about Brian's case and several others, but we don't have that much time. I want to give Dom some time to talk, and then we'll see where we go from there. So again, it's nice to finally meet you guys, and I look forward to talking to you next week on Skype.